In just a few days' time, a raft of new US tariffs are due to come into force, and Europe is poised to retaliate. Meanwhile, the government here says it wants a closer relationship with the EU. Well, this week I sat down with the French Europe Minister, Benjamin Haddad, who's been in town. Minister, President Trump's trade tariffs will hit Europe within days. How serious will that be for France?
Look, first, we consider these tariffs to be unjustified, and they're in no one's interest. When you look at even the economic impact they're having already on the U.S. economy, on U.S. businesses, and the EU has already stated that if we have further tariffs, we need a united response, we need a firm response, we need a proportional response. We don't want protectionism or trade war. Once again, it's in no one's interest. But the only way to make that clear is precisely to show that we have the ability to respond and to hopefully de-escalate. We went through this under the first term of the Trump presidency. As you know, there were tariffs and the EU put together countermeasures, and we managed to find an agreement and put this behind us. So hopefully we won't have to go through this. But once again, as we have stated, we think the EU should have a firm response, and this is already what's been stated by the Commission President.
How firm, how tough is that response going to be? Mr. Trump doesn't seem to pay too much attention to words.
You're completely right, and this is why the only way to be heard, to be respected, is to show that you have the ability to defend your own interests.
The American Vice President says, and we've seen this now, he hates bailing out Europe on defence. Defence Secretary called it pathetic. How do you respond to the attitude of the administration toward Europe?
Look, I will say I strongly believe that the US is an ally and we need to continue to work with the US. We have so many security challenges that we face together, starting with facing the Russian aggression on Ukraine and finding the conditions for a peaceful, just ending to this war.
Is it now that you think that the Americans are an unreliable ally? They might be the ally you want, but one you can't depend on anymore.
Look, I want the US to be an ally, but only because I think, once again, as I mentioned, that we have common security challenges. That, look, if you take Ukraine, for instance, if we were to give in to Russia, if we were to push Ukraine towards capitulation, that would be disastrous for European security. That would be disastrous for US security and interest. What kind of message would that send to China, to Iran, or to others that the US cares about? So I think we need to continue to work together. But as I said once again, I think the best way to answer your question is to say, well, let's invest in our security. Let's have our own defense industry.
In Paris, the so-called coalition of the willing agreed that there would be what's called a reassurance force. Well, first of all, why is a reassurance force different from peacekeeping? And how did you react to Steve Witkoff, the Trump envoy, saying that peacekeepers are nothing but, his words, a posture and a pose?
First, let me try to explain what we're trying to achieve here. First, the war is still going on. And there's one country that has chosen war and aggression, and that is still turning its back to serious talks of ceasefire negotiations. It's Russia. If you take President Zelensky of Ukraine, he's agreed almost 2 weeks ago to a full truce for 30 days to be able to engage in long-term negotiation. And Russia has not responded. On the contrary, it's actually escalating its aggression on the ground against civilian targets, military targets in Ukraine, but also has maximalist aims against Ukraine, trying to deprive Ukraine from an independent future. So our first objective is to continue to increase our support for Ukraine, to put pressure on Russia to get sincere negotiation. And then, once we have this, how do we ensure that a ceasefire leads to a real peace? Why do I say this? Because we don't want this to be just a break, a parenthesis that Russia uses to rearm and then re-attack Ukraine in a few years, because we've been through this before.
So
we saw the Minsk agreements in 2014,
Indeed.
2015 that Russia violated dozens of times.
I just want to deal very briefly with a final issue, which of course is immigration. Let me put it straightforwardly. Small boat crossings from France, UK, they've never been higher than at this point of the year. We signed the...
They have been higher.
Well,
in
they've
the
been
past,
higher,
actually,
but
yes.
at this point of the year, they've never been high. The UK has given France over 500 million to tackle illegal immigration. It's not working. And from this side of the channel, people will say the reason is France is not pulling its weight.
No, it's not true. And actually, I think that gives disservice to both the French and the British forces that are working together today to tackle illegal migration. The truth is we're facing a more global challenge on migration. If you look at even the European Union is developing its tools to be able to enforce its external borders. We have smugglers networks that are human traffickers, that are criminals, that are dealing in human misery and pushing people on these boats. And we have a strong cooperation with, I would say, France actually funding a huge part of this effort with French policemen that are facing. Well, if you look at the numbers, last year we had lower numbers than in 2023. But once again, this is a challenge that the UK is facing, France is facing, all of Europe is facing, and we need to continue to cooperate. We need to continue to work together on this.
Monsieur le Ministre, merci beaucoup.
Thank you.